Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of She Exudes Now Virtual Talks. I am the host, Alicia Renee, and I am the founder of The Confident Lily. And we are here for another great show. I have another great guest that I will bring to the stage in just a moment. But the She Exudes Now Virtual Talk is just an opportunity for us to get together and discuss all things that are pertinent to today's woman, to provide inspiration and some practical tools and advice to kind of get you through some of those days. And so our topic today is about blended family bliss. And so we know that blended families are very common in today's time. And sometimes the road to having a peaceful and well-mended family can be a little difficult. So today we're going to talk about how you can create bliss in your household. So I am going to bring to the stage my guest for today. Hello, hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, I'm so excited that you are joining us today because I have been a guest on your show.
Yeah.
So let me introduce everyone to you. I have Miss Stephanie K with me today. She also goes by Sage the Coach. And she is a woman of many tools. You wear many hats.
Yeah.
So she is an author. She is a coach, a multi-certified coach, and she is a podcast host as well. But I'm going to let Stephanie just kind of share a little bit more about herself. And if you want to share anything about your family experience as well, you can do that.
Yeah. So again, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, and I just want to let you all know if you're interested in watching the show that we did on my own podcast, you can do so on my page on Facebook. It's called Outside the Box with Sage the Coach. Alicia just talked a little bit about her business, her motivation behind the business, and so if you want to know more about that, you can find it on my page. So about me, like you said, I'm an author. That was what I was before I became all of these other, started wearing all these other hats. I've been writing since I was a kid. So I'm an author and eventually got my certification in life coaching because a lot of my writing revolve around, like, I guess you could say Christian self-help, women's based stuff. So I always found myself talking to women about their different issues, even talking about my own different issues and trying to get guidance and insight into those things. And they just all went into my writing. Even me praying to God about some certain things that I didn't understand and him giving me the answers, I put that stuff in my writing. And so that's what I was doing first, but it kind of naturally gravitated to being a coach because I was kind of already doing it. I just didn't have the title. And I'm a person who likes to learn. So once I went for one certification, I just went for another one and another one and another one. And I still have a couple of more classes that I've paid for that I need to take those as well. So I will have more certifications. And so on top of that, I got into podcasting last year. I was asked to do a show on a different platform. Since then, I've kind of went off on my own, but I'm still doing my own podcast called Outside the Box, where I aim to help people see that God is bigger than our boxes, because I know in my own Christian walk, whenever God came on the scene, and you see this in the Bible, and whenever He did anything for me or answered a question for me, it was totally different than anything I was even thinking. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
was totally out of my wheelhouse and things like that. And so I just want to kind of help people to understand that God is much bigger than a lot of the experiences we have, the struggles we have, and things like that, so that we can hold on to Him a little bit tighter through life's
Mm-hmm.
difficulties. And so, outside of being a podcast host and an author and a coach, I am also a mother of 5 children, and I've been married coming up here at the end of this year for 15 years. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So you've got a lot of experience.
right,
You've got the inspirational piece and the motivational piece down, but you also have some life experience too. So
exactly.
that always makes it a little bit more fine tuned when you can say, I've been through some things.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And so we talked about on Instagram. If you whoever is watching that didn't see the what we did on Instagram before we came here, I have 5 kids, but two of my kids I had before I got married. So I came into
Mhm.
the marriage with 2 kids, and that is a lot of where my blended family experience come from. As far as also talking to other women, and then I come from a blended family as well. My
Mhm.
mother has 7 kids, and my older sister was not my father's biological daughter. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Great. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to this discussion.
yeah.
So, before we get started, I always like to ask all of my guests, what are you exuding today? So, I'll go first,
Yeah.
actually. I am exuding patience and calmness because I
Mm.
have had a crazy 2 days. It has been crazy. It has been adventurous. There
Mm.
have been lots of obstacles in the way, and I'm going to share my little testimony tomorrow. So it's good news, but then it was also just like, when you're on the brink of a blessing, but you can't quite get it. It's
Mm.
like it's
Mm.
right there, but you
Oh
can't
my
quite get
goodness.
it. So it's like one
Yeah.
of those type of things. So in the midst of all the things having to do to get there, I was calm and I was
Mm.
impressed with myself because normally I would just be ready to just like, this is not right, that's not right. But
Yeah.
I was calm. So I'm exuding that. And I thank God for just, grace and improvement, progress.
Amen. 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 I mean, I know that I talked about on my podcast several times how I struggled with depression for many,
Mhm.
many years. And so again, like you say, me seeing the progress in the area, not getting so down when stuff
Mhm.
happens and getting stuck in a rut. And I'll be
Mhm.
honest and even say I used to like get upset with God, because if you're struggling with depression, you get down. Who do you blame?
Right.
So you like, hey, and so I would just be like, oh, why are you not doing this? You're not helping,
Mhm.
blah blah. But over the years, I don't do that anymore, and so I'm
Mhm.
like, yes, I understand. I thank God for progress.
Yes, thank
Yeah,
God for progress.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm.
All right. So we're going to get into the discussion, but I just noticed that we didn't have our background up. So there we
Okay,
go.
no problem.
We are official now.
Yeah.
All right. So let's jump right into talking about blended families. So, as I mentioned, and you mentioned earlier as well, blended families are very common these days.
Yeah.
And many times people think, it is, formed through a marriage.
Yeah.
And I would say predominantly that is how blended families are birthed.
Mhm.
But there could be other types as well. So I'm gonna let you, kind of share with us some of the other types of blended families, and we'll just kind of piggyback off of that.
Yeah. So I mean, I mostly see blended families like what you're saying, as far as
Hmm.
like through marriage when people bring other children into the marriage, sometimes before, sometimes after, sometimes
Hmm.
during, and so
Yikes.
yeah. I've heard a few of those stories. So yeah,
Hmm.
so people bring other children to the family. Children have a parent in the family that's not their biological parent. And so that's really kind of how I define blended families. And so if you have some other ideas, I'll be interested in hearing them. But that's kind of how I see it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you mentioned, maybe parents coming into it. It could be the case that you're marrying someone that takes care of their elderly parent or, a
Oh
handicapped
yeah.
loved one or something like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so now, when you get married, you're bringing on that responsibility too.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
predominantly, like you mentioned, it is, bringing children to a marriage, or, somebody might have brought, you might have been already married and had
Look,
something.
that too. That too.
So,
That too.
yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is typically how those relationships are birthed.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the things that maybe people should be prepared for when they decide that, okay, they want to combine families. There definitely, we mentioned there's some conversations that should be had. I think
Yeah.
the two parties, the husband or the wife, should definitely have some conversations about, this is how I parent. These are my children, and they still have relationships with their mothers, or whomever, or have five children, and they're all five are going to have to move in, or there may be five children, but only one is going to have to move in. So
Yeah. Oh
what are some
goodness.
of those conversations that definitely need to be had before families are combined?
Well, I mean, first of all, having the conversation is always good because it prepares you for it, because the communication is there. So if you cannot have the conversation, then that's really a big sign that
Mhm.
the real deal is not going to work, because you can't even talk about it with the person that you're trying to blend the family with. So the
Mhm.
conversation is definitely necessary, and to keep that communication open, when the family is blending, you guys are still able to talk about what is happening, and from a team mentality, as opposed
Mhm.
to now
Mhm.
you and your kids and me and my kids, or whatever like that. So I would say
Mhm.
communication is very, 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 very important. um, but one of the things, and now when you're getting married in general, even without kids, you're blending two lives together. So you're
Mhm.
blending finances, you're blending your residence where you live, you're blending, bills and things like
Yeah.
that. And so that's already on top of that, and it kind of comes with the territory when it comes with family stuff. But when it
Mhm.
comes to, like, bringing kids into the equation, you really have to talk about, what type of expectations you have for the
Mhm.
person, like how you expect them to respond to your kids, vice versa. How you guys are going to deal with disciplining the kids,
Yeah.
and things like
Mhm.
that. When the kids have problems with each other, how do you deal with that?
Mhm.
Just to have a very good understanding about what the expectations are. But I think it's important to keep in mind that those expectations are not nailed in. It's not, what's the word, etched in stone, because
Mhm.
things are going to change. Things are going to come up, because it's
Mhm.
easy to have a conversation when stuff is not actually happening and passions
Right.
are not high. But if
Mhm.
your kid punches my kid in the eye, some of that stuff is gonna go to the back of your mind. You're gonna be like,
Mhm.
no, but he hit my
Mhm.
kid. And but it's good to have the expectation, because it always gives you something to go back to, and that's why I think it's
Mhm.
really important to, the Bible talks about not being unequally yoked, because there will be problems, and
Mhm.
you need something to go back to as a standard for how you move forward. Because if you don't
Right.
have a standard, okay, let's go back to what we both believe, and let's go from there. It becomes much more complicated to actually to fix the problem or sort through the
Right.
problem. So yeah,
Right. Absolutely.
yeah,
And I think also having those conversations with the children as well, and trying to get them acclimated to the other party.
right,
That's something, if your little kids do not get along with JoJo and Johnny,
right,
and like you said, they're fighting, they're punching each other, there's some work that needs to be done.
yeah,
So maybe it's not the right time
yeah,
to,
yeah, yeah,
bring everybody together in the household.
exactly.
So there's definitely things to be on the lookout for. I know parenting styles are always an issue because, one parent may feel that, their form of discipline is, punishments and timeouts. The other person may feel like, oh, I believe in spanking and, all that. or maybe there is no discipline. And so, you have to be very careful. You want to tread on water, because you don't want to upset the other party, upset the children, and then they're going off and telling other family members about what's going on in the household, and it's just ends up becoming this snowball effect that ends
Yeah,
up in a mess.
yeah,
So really taking the time to make sure that the kids are on board, that they can get along, that they understand what the new situation is going to look like, and that they respect the other parties as well. It's all about respect, in my
yeah,
opinion.
yeah, yeah. And I would say, like what you said, which I think is key, is that a lot of these conversations should be had before you
Hmm.
actually get married. You shouldn't be getting married next week and now you're having these conversations, because you do need to
Hmm.
give kids and even the adults in the situation time to acclimate to this new
Yeah.
way of
Hmm.
being. But I will even go so far as to say, even in relationships or marriages where they're not blended, parents still conflict when it comes to disciplining your
Hmm.
kids. And
Hmm.
so but when it comes to blended families, the problem becomes, are you treating my child this way because they're not your
Oh.
child? You
Hmm.
know, or you getting defensive because it is your child, and you knowing that that person is not necessarily biological parent, and so
Hmm.
you become protective of your kids.
Hmm.
So your spouse may be doing the very thing that they need to do as a parent, but because that's your child, you're going to be more protective of your
Hmm.
child and things like that. So it's really important to keep those things in I guess balance, or in the
Hmm.
forefront of your mind, so that you allow the other parent to even be a parent and not just try to interfere because this is my child. And like I said, it's
Right.
vice versa, because and then another thing I would say is treating the kids differently. So
Hmm.
you treat your kids differently from the other person's kids, or again vice versa. And so those are some of the things that kind of really come out in my mind in the forefront, that usually end up becoming a problem. Because
Hmm.
I know, even for when I got married or whatever, and my husband was disciplining my son, and you mentioned other family members, they were like, "Oh, he shouldn't be disciplining him because
Hmm.
that's not." And you have to tell your family, "Hey, you need to stay out of this,"
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So, and like you said, kids go tell other family members,
Hmm.
and let's not talk about the kids going and tell their other parent that's not in the
Yes.
household. And so it can create a snowball of
Yes.
problems if you
Yes.
don't deal with it very, very carefully. I mean, it takes a lot of wisdom,
Hmm.
a lot of patience, a lot of honesty.
Hmm.
And if you can't get a good grasp on that before the I do's, then maybe that's not
Hmm.
the right situation for you. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah. So many things came out of what you just said.
yeah, yeah,
First of all, making sure that you do things in the right timing. And
yeah.
so, okay, you feel like you're ready to combine households. Your kids, they get along for the most part. You feel like you get along with the children as well, but not just going, gung ho and forcing so many changes all at once,
Mm,
because that's when people start to feel like overwhelmed. And, if you are resistant, you start pushing back like, oh my gosh, I don't like this. It's too much new things, too many new things going on.
mm,
And, depending on the child, because everyone has different personalities and they're going to react differently. They may be missing, when you were with mommy or when you were with daddy, or they
yeah,
may be like, okay, well, this person is great. However, she's not my real mom. And so
yeah,
I'm only going to listen to half the things that she tells
yeah,
me.
yeah.
So, taking the time to foster those relationships and to develop this new situation is important so that we don't just spring things upon individuals.
Yeah, because you have to give the kids time, like you were saying, to get acclimated to the situation. Because the first thing that they're gonna feel like is they're losing something.
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
mean, even when you have kids and they have babies come into the family, they're like, "Who is this baby?"
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
this baby's gonna take attention away from me and stuff from
Mhm.
my parents. So how much more kids, like you say, you coming into, and now it's another
Mhm.
somebody your age, or
Mhm.
you're used to being a baby of the family, and now there's somebody younger than you in there, and so
Mhm.
you really have to allow the kids and give the kids time to understand that they're not losing anything by
Mhm.
joining the family together, and you kind of have to be patient and understand where the kid is mentally, so
Mhm.
that you'll know if they're really getting it, or they're getting comfortable with the situation, or they're not feeling threatened by the situation. And it will take time. It will
Yeah.
take time. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Because, if they were used to being the only child, or like you said, if there's a new baby that comes that's formed by the new couple,
Yeah.
now, this baby is going to be getting all the attention,
Yeah.
and it's not so much on that other child anymore. So they're going to
Yeah.
have to deal with that as well. And, we have to work through those internal feelings that they have.
Yeah. And I would say, like, and we talked about this a little bit on Instagram, you have to pray. I mean, you really,
Mhm.
really have to pray, because there are going to be things going on that you're not going to be aware of, or you're not able to see.
Mhm.
And God can open your mind up to those things that you're not aware of. Because I know even in my own parenting, there have been times where I could be, maybe writing a page in my book, and God
Mhm.
would tell me to stop what I'm doing and go hug my daughter.
Oh,
And
right.
in my
Mhm.
mind, I'm like, I'm busy. I'm trying
Yeah.
to get this page out. I'm on the deadline. If I can get this done by, and he's
Mhm.
like, hey, go hug your daughter. And so,
Mhm.
I would go hug my daughter, and all of a sudden she would just break down crying. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what
Mhm.
is going on? And
Mhm.
so I wasn't thinking anything. She seemed fine to me, but it's
Mhm.
me following the leading of the Holy Spirit to understand where she is at mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, so that I can respond to that instead of
Mhm.
just responding to my own stuff or what I think I'm seeing. So it's
Right.
very, very crucial that you pray, because God will give you keys. Say the other kid is not warming up to you, and God
Mhm.
can say, okay, do this for the kid. You don't know what that means for that kid. It might even seem stupid, but by
Mhm.
you following God's leading and letting him direct you into how to respond and things like that, you're going to get much further than just trying to play it by ear, and even
Mhm.
just talking to your partner, and that's it. Like, you're going to get much further if you include God in that process.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So, how do you react when there are other parties involved? For example, if you have the baby mama or the baby daddy, or, even grandparents, aunts, uncles, whomever. Sometimes those grandparents, and I know my mom is probably going to watch this and say something, but sometimes they can add their 2 cents when it wasn't asked.
Oh, look. Oh, my goodness. Look.
So, how do you deal with all of that? You're hearing all of these things, the kids are taking back information. You try to say, what goes on in this household stays here.
Yeah.
And then, you're hearing things come back. And, sometimes the message that comes back is not, necessarily positive.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that involvement from other family members?
I mean, you really have to, again, pray and
Mhm.
make sure you're doing things in the way that God would want them to be done. Because as long as you're doing things in the way that God wants them to be done, it's for a good end. He's not going
Mhm.
to tell you to do anything that's going to lead to a destructive end. But you will, and you may have to stand your ground for a season in order
Mhm.
to get to that productive end. And sometimes you just have to tell people. And when you're secure in what you're doing and you know it's what God wants you to do, it helps you to stand your ground.
Mhm.
And it helps when you have your partner standing ground with you, for you guys to stand together instead of you standing alone.
Mhm.
But sometimes you do have to stand alone. Unfortunately, that does happen. But if you're grounded in what God is telling you to do, then it helps. And you just have to stand your ground and say, hey, this is
Mhm.
not going to happen. And nip it in the bud. Don't let it go on and on and on and on and on. You have to nip it in the bud right away, and just stand your ground and let the chips fall where they may. Sometimes it's going to bring some heat to you,
Mhm.
but God knows how to use that heat to bring out something beautiful within you and your
Mhm.
family. So sometimes you just have to endure it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, having that united front.
Mm.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very important. If you feel strongly that this is what you and your mate want to do, and this is how you want to rear your family. You think it's for the best interest for all parties involved, including the children. Keep that united front.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what's important because this is your household.
yeah.
So yes.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing that makes that difficult is when your emotions are involved, right? Because if it's your
Mm,
parent, you love your parent. You don't want to have an issue with your parent or falling
hmm
out with your parent. Or if it's, another one of the other children in the house or your own, like it's your emotional connection to these people that makes the situation, it brings it to another level of stress. Because if it was
hmm
just somebody walking down the street that you don't have, it doesn't bother you as much. So
hmm
you have to learn how to keep your, and I say this especially for me and other women that might be watching, you have to
hmm
keep your feelings in perspective. You can't let
hmm
your feelings run away with the situation because you just want so and so to be happy, or you just want so and so to not be upset with you, or you just want so and so to not think badly of you. Like sometimes you have to put those things into perspective and leave them there and still
Yes.
do the thing that's right. And you can feel something without necessarily responding to it or reacting from it.
hmm
Like a lot of times you might feel upset and sad and then you want to go off on somebody. You don't have to go off.
Yeah.
You can just be upset, take
Yeah.
some time to yourself, allow yourself to feel that, because if
hmm
you're upset, but you don't necessarily have to let that translate into you reacting a certain way that's not going to be
hmm
beneficial for the situation. Yeah.
Definitely. Yep. I like that. So I wanted to speak about challenges that can occur, and we've kind of already talked about that a little bit. Um, One challenge that I would like to make sure that we bring out, because I know it can be difficult, is when you are dealing with a parent from the previous relationship that may be, the child's mother or father, and they may not necessarily like this new person.
Yeah.
Or, if they're clinging on to some previous feelings, that can be difficult. There may also be some legal matters
Yeah.
involved as well. And
Yeah.
so it's tough,
It
seeing
is.
your significant other going through these things and you want to jump in and try to help or save the day, but you kind of need to know your role and know
Yeah.
when to fall back and let them handle that.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on that?
I agree with what you said, because I think, and I say this even for myself, and I think women might have a little bit more. I don't know, but whoever's watching
Mhm.
can know if this applies to them or not. But I think even for me, sometimes I want to fix everything, and I feel
Mhm.
like it's my job to fix everything. Especially as a mom, I have 5 kids. I'm constantly fixing fixing people's problems,
Uh-huh.
and so you just kind of get it in your head that it's up to you and you have to fix it, and it's not up to you. You don't have to
Mhm.
fix everything all the time. And even as my kids have gotten older, I have had to learn that lesson a little bit more, that
Mhm.
you have to give them the space, and you don't always have to be the fixer and jump in and think that it's up to you. If you It's up to you to do all the right things for things to go right. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's not. Sometimes you just have to take a step back, do your part, and trust God with the rest of it. Like even
Mhm.
what you're saying, when you have legal matters and things like that, of course these things are difficult. It's very easy for our minds to go to the worst case
Mhm.
scenario or the worst outcome. A lot of times that's not usually what happens. Our imaginations are
Mhm.
much worse than reality in a lot of cases. So you just have to do what you can do now. Be
Mhm.
supportive now, especially if it's to your partner. Make sure you're doing the right thing at all times. If it's difficult to do the right thing, pray, ask
Mhm.
God to help you do
Yeah.
the right thing, because sometimes it is difficult. And just trust God and let Him work it
Mhm.
out, because usually over time, stuff, if you're following God and you're doing the right thing, you will see that things will work out for your good. Even if it
Mhm.
doesn't look like it's any way possible for that to happen in this moment under these circumstances, it definitely can. If anybody can turn it around, God can turn it around. So you just have to trust
Exactly.
Him. Yeah.
And I would also say boundaries
Yeah.
are important, and making
Very.
sure that you are establishing those boundaries with, those other family members, because, they, sometimes don't have the best intentions.
Yeah,
And
they don't.
so,
Yeah.
if you were used to connecting with your child's mother, for example, if you were used to connecting and she could, call you at any time of the night, text you about, little Johnny has a
Yeah.
fever, or this is what Johnny needs for the school for the next day. That might have been okay when you were single.
Right.
But now
Right.
that you're married and you have, someone else involved in this relationship, that's not appropriate. So
Yeah.
establishing those boundaries, whatever they may look like, is definitely important.
Yeah, and that's what I meant, like by standing your ground. Like you just
Hmm.
have to stand your ground, which is you're right. I think it's even better to say set boundaries. But I think the most important thing to mention in setting boundaries is that the struggle that people have sometimes when it comes to setting boundaries is self esteem. And so if
Mm-hmm.
you don't have a strong self esteem or a sense of who you are, it becomes very, very difficult for you to set boundaries with other people.
Hmm. Very
And so
true.
it's important for you to work on yourself, and again include God in that process of
Hmm.
understanding who you are, your value, your worth, getting over any issues that you may have that is affecting your self-esteem or the way you see
Hmm.
yourself, so that you are able to set boundaries in a very stern way without I guess without it really bothering you too. I mean, it's going to
Hmm.
bother you to some extent, but some people just can't really set boundaries. And so
Hmm.
it comes
Hmm.
back to their own identity, how they see themselves and stuff like that. So it's
Hmm.
important to work on yourself for your marriage, for your kids, for your stepkids
Hmm.
and things like that. And dealing with your parents, it all comes back to yourself. So you have to be
Hmm.
able to do that. And I would even say when you were talking about dealing with the other parents, a lot of
Hmm.
times, and I did a show about blending families a few months back, and I had a couple
Hmm.
on, and they both brought kids into the relationship, and they both had exes in the picture
Okay.
and everything.
Hmm.
And so they talked about, especially the man in the situation, he talked about the healing that needed to take place between him and his exes. That
Hmm.
that God even pointed out to him that he needed to go back and apologize to about some
Hmm.
things that he did in the past when it came to
Hmm.
those other women, and it changed the way that they were interacting with the family. And
Wow.
so
Hmm.
sometimes you have to resolve that issue and
Hmm.
forgive, and then ask for forgiveness yourself, so that they can interact with your family in a much more
Yeah.
positive way, because the person is not going anywhere,
Right.
and
Hmm.
so it's better to try to have their relationship be as smooth as you possibly can. Sometimes
Hmm.
it's not possible. I will say that the Bible says to get along with people as much as you're able to, which shows that
Hmm.
sometimes you're not going to be able to. But you do what you're supposed to do. You do your
Hmm.
part. You
Right.
make sure your part is taken care of, and then that's when you trust God for the rest of it. So sometimes you do have to go back and resolve some things. And
Hmm.
like you said, boundaries, like, hey, look, I'm in a relationship now. You can't do this. You can't do that. But if
Hmm.
you have a pretty good relationship with the ex, and you guys are in a good place,
Hmm.
they usually are can adjust quite quickly to that. It's
Hmm.
unresolved stuff that usually ends
Right.
up causing problems. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I love that. That's a
Yeah.
great point. Unresolved issues, having to go back and do the work,
Yeah.
whatever it looks like.
Yeah.
It may be, 15 years ago that you owe somebody an apology, but, that may be what is needed to make
Yeah.
sure that your future is a lot more smoother. Things go a lot more smoother.
Yeah.
And like we said, setting those boundaries. So, an additional challenge. So, on the flip side, so if you have an elderly parent that has moved in to the household,
Yeah.
there may be some boundaries that you have to establish there as well, because
Absolutely.
I can just imagine from my own experience and just from people that I've known that have taken care of parents or, handicapped loved ones, it can be challenging.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes, those individuals are difficult. They see you as one way, either their
Mhm.
child or,
Mm.
sister, brother, whatever it is.
Mm.
And they don't see you as this married woman who is the queen of her household.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
see you as you're going to do what I say because I brought you into this world.
And
So, it's a
yeah, and I would
challenge.
even say for me, sometimes I've noticed in my own circumstances that, and I'm not going to name the parents, but they want to save you from difficulty,
Hmm.
and you
Hmm.
grow from difficulty. So if I keep trying to save my kids from struggling,
Hmm.
then they're not going to learn anything. And so and I do sometimes feel the need, like when I see them struggling, I just want to jump in there,
Yeah.
again, like I talked about before. but it's God, like, no, let them figure it out. And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you still have that mentality. Even with your older kids, when you see them struggling, you try to
Mm-hmm.
jump in and no, okay, but I need to go through this. I don't need you to
Mm-hmm.
come in and save me from
Right.
normal marriage problems. I don't
Yeah.
need you to come and, like,
Yeah.
because that's how we learn, that's how we grow. And it can be difficult. It can be very, very difficult. But the only solution to that, once again, is prayer and setting
Mm-hmm.
boundaries and
Mm-hmm.
holding and keeping them there, because it's one thing if you have the boundary and you keep moving it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
one minute
Mm-hmm.
you establish a boundary and you hold fast to it, and then next week you're being lax on it. Like, you
Right.
really have to keep it there and make sure it stays there, just for the purpose of clarity. Like, we understand
Mm-hmm.
where we are, where you are, and just stay. Eventually, I think the person is either going to back off, or they're going to say, I don't want to be here. Or, you know, I
Mm-hmm.
know in the case where you said it's handicapped people and things like that. But you know, you just have to hold that boundary,
Mm-hmm.
and what else can you do, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Stand
Yeah.
firm, communicate that these are the rules, this is what's gonna happen.
Exactly.
I love you, we love you, but
Exactly. It
here's
has to
some
be.
things that have to happen in order for this to work out.
Exactly. And pray
Hmm.
for peace. Pray
Yes,
for peace.
yes. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
So let's talk about challenging children, especially those teenagers, because we know when they get to that age, they begin to be mouthy.
Mm-hmm.
They want to do what they want to do. They think they know everything. I was one of those, thought I knew everything. But
I
I
have not.
was respectful.
I have not met a teenager thus far who was not like that. If I can
Right.
meet one, I really want to sit down and have a conversation with
Right.
them.
Are you real? Are you
Yeah.
normal? So, okay, how do we deal with those situations? Because they can be very, very stressful.
Yeah.
And just
Yeah.
looking in, you being the other parent, the new parent, you may be saying, oh, well, I don't agree with this. I don't agree with that. This is not called for in this household. But, the other parent may be saying, well, you don't have the full history on everything that's been going on. Or the child might be acting out because they don't like the situation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what do you do then?
Oh my goodness. I mean, these are some, I mean, because they are very, very challenging circumstances. And it's
Mhm.
stuff like this a lot of times that relationships don't recover from and they can't
Right.
recover
Hmm.
from. And so, you know, we laugh and we're trying to, you know, just kind of offer some tips. But these things are very, very serious. And if
Right.
you don't handle them the right way, a lot of the times you will, that will cause a divide between you and your partner
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
sometimes can't be fixed or can't be bridged. And I don't want to say can't be as if it's impossible, but the
Hmm.
work that it will take, because anything broken can be fixed. You just
Yes.
have to put the work in, and a lot of times you don't have both people willing to put the work in. So
Yeah.
so
Hmm.
sometimes it's just not able to get back to that place because the person is so heartbroken or so disillusioned or so disappointed that they don't want to put the
Hmm.
work in anymore. Or sometimes that can even be you, where you feel like
Hmm.
I don't want to put the work in anymore. And so it's very, very challenging, but it really takes, first of all, for you to make sure your heart is in the right place, because
Hmm.
I can look at that on both sides. For the parent that's not the biological parent, and say you have a child, that the child in the home that's not yours, and they're disrespecting you,
Hmm.
and you're
Hmm.
like, you're not even my child. You know,
Yeah.
like, because I mean, even the parent, you kind of want to put the kid back wherever they came from, you know. So how much more a parent where that's not their kid, they like, I don't want to deal
Hmm.
with this. And so you really have to give some grace to your partner, some grace to yourself,
Hmm.
even grace to your child, and make sure that in the midst of all that, your heart is in the right place, because that's what God is going to be able to use to direct you on how to handle it, because it is difficult. Like, it's
Right.
just a season that you have to go through. If you're a parent and you avoid that teenage season, you are blessed. So, but
Right.
it's just a season you have to go through, and there's really no shortcuts around it, and you just have to endure. The thing to me is making sure you don't make it worse. You know,
Right.
making decisions that don't make it worse, that you're responding in the ways that bring healing and
Hmm.
understanding, and peace in the house, instead of now on top of the kid being upset, now you're upset on top of them being upset, and then
Hmm.
nobody's talking to each other, and then your spouse is upset, and then you're offended, and it can turn into a whirlwind of problems. So
Right.
it's
Hmm.
difficult and it's challenging, but it can be done. And it
Hmm.
can and it will pass. The Bible talks about this too shall
Hmm.
pass, it will pass. So you just have to endure it and make sure you're making the right decisions for everybody involved, and letting God lead you out of on
Hmm.
to the other side of that storm. So yeah.
Yeah. All of that. All of that is very necessary. I will also say, make sure you check in with, therapy as well, because we're
Mm-hmm.
talking a lot about, prayer and making sure that you're prepared, you're communicating, all of those things.
Mm.
But sometimes, therapy is very needed.
Yeah.
And so children, have things that they have to work through as well. Sometimes there may be some classes and things like that we as parents can take,
Yeah.
to give us more knowledge and education on how to connect better with our children.
Yeah.
So I would definitely say, don't forget about that piece of it as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up, because, of course, I'm a life coach. So people
Hmm.
do come to me with these sorts of things.
Hmm.
And I think, and I'm glad you brought that up, because even in the midst of praying and things like that, it's not always easy, especially in the midst of what's going on and when there's a lot of emotion involved, to hear God all
Hmm.
the time
Right.
and to know how He's leading you. And God is not upset by that. A lot of times I think we get hard on ourselves as Christians when we're not hearing God crystal clear. We think,
Hmm.
oh, I'm not a good Christian or something like that, or God is very far from me. He's left me because I'm messing up or I'm doing something
Hmm.
wrong or whatever. But the fact is that when you have so much going on in you, in your mind and in your heart, it can kind of cloud your ability to hear from God. And He
Yeah.
understands that, which is why He offers even podcasts like this, where we're
Yeah.
talking about these things, and life coaches and psychologists and
Hmm.
pastors and friends, to be able to people to help you, and God can speak through them and help them to
Hmm.
kind of give you some guidance in the situation, because you're not going to be able to figure everything out on your own. I mean, it
Hmm.
is difficult. And so even with prayer, God can still use that prayer to lead you to somebody
Hmm.
who can offer you some answers that
Right.
is very difficult for you to kind of figure out on your own. So yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah.
That is a wonderful point. Very, very good, because I know I'm a big proponent of listening to podcasts and inspirational speaking. And, anytime I can drill down on a particular topic, whatever I'm going through or whatever I want to learn more about, I'm all about it.
Yeah.
Finding those online trainings or just connecting with people that are going to be able to give me some more knowledge
Yeah.
and, put something in me, impart some wisdom within me, because we don't know it all.
Yeah, we
And
don't. We
so,
don't.
we're just cultivating, trying to cultivate this spirit and walking through life, just like everybody else is. So
Yeah.
it's definitely important to reach out to others, maybe even other families that have walked through some of the same
Exactly.
things, and get some advice from them as well.
Exactly. And the thing is that all of this is a growing process. So these
Hmm.
difficulties are not, they come to grow us. Like, they come to stretch
Hmm.
us. Parenting stretches you. I'm pretty sure being a step parent stretches you even more.
Yeah.
Marriage stretches you. Like, God uses all these things in our lives to stretch us and to
Hmm.
teach us more things about ourselves, other people, Him, to increase our
Hmm.
wisdom and understanding about how to deal with these certain circumstances. So even that, we can get to a point where when somebody else needs some help, now we have learned the tools and things like that to be able to help other people in those situations. But yeah, it's all for growth. All of it is for growth.
Hmm.
So you don't have to feel like, if you're struggling with something like this, that it's unusual, or you're being
Hmm.
punished or something like that. God uses all of it for our good, and it's all to grow us. And as long as you grow, I think
Hmm.
you're on the right path. If you're not
Right.
growing, then that's when there's a problem to me.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk, and switch gears for a moment and talk about some things that we can do to help the children, or even, our other loved ones that may be coming into the household with us, to help make them feel valued and respected, and to feel like they are an important piece in the household.
Yeah. I
in the
like that. It's
puzzle.
funny that you just asked that question because what just came into my mind with everything that we're talking about, it has to be done in love. Like
Hmm.
everything has to be done
Hmm.
in love and not out of anger, bitterness. Some, like I said, sometimes we have some past traumas that we need to deal
Hmm.
with, but doing things in love, even if it's setting boundaries, correcting, discipline, it's always going to give you a better result than doing it any other way. And so
Hmm.
when you do things in love, you are more careful to make sure, like what you just said, that people are feeling valued, that they're feeling appreciated, that they're feeling
Hmm.
like they're not being lost in the midst of whatever transition is going on in their lives. So you
Hmm.
really have to make sure you're doing things from a place of love, and that you're genuinely concerned about the people involved, sometimes a little bit more than you're concerned about yourself, not in a dysfunctional way,
Hmm.
because sometimes you have people who, they give, and then they don't reserve anything for themselves, and they think that that's love. That's not. That's
Right.
dysfunction, because
Hmm.
you can't love anybody else more than you love yourself. So
Hmm.
but you do for people out of love. You make sacrifices for people out of love, so that they can be okay, even if it means it costs you a little bit of something. But
Yeah.
yeah, doing things in love is very, very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I would also add to that and say, find something special about each member of the family
Yeah.
and make sure to bring it up and celebrate it.
Yeah.
So if we know it could be something as simple as, you know, uh, the kids love this particular snack. And
Mm.
so, when you're rewarding them, bringing this in and celebrating it and them feeling like, oh, this person really likes me because they know that this is my favorite,
Mm.
and they're making sure to point me out and
Yeah.
say, hey, this is for you. Or, if such and such is involved in this sport or activity, how about going together as a family and making sure that you're supporting that child? And
Yeah.
it just kind of shows unity. It shows that, hey, I'm here to support you in your life, not necessarily you come in and conform to what we're trying to do, but
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
trying to embrace you in your uniqueness as well.
Absolutely. And basically, one of the things that I get from what you're saying is quality time. And so make sure
Hmm.
you're spending time. And that's important because, we're human beings. Who doesn't feel special when somebody makes out time for you to give you
Hmm.
their undivided attention? So that's very, very important as a couple, as a parent. And then
Hmm.
even if you're doing it to all of your kids together, sometimes you have to do it for the kids individually so that they can know that they have some uniqueness from the bunch, that they
Hmm.
have their own little bit of time with you. And so that time is very, very important. But another thing I wanted to mention is it kind of goes with doing things in love, but speaking life. Because, and it kind of goes with what you were saying about, finding something that you like about the person and kind of talking. Because in these situations, it can be very, very frustrating, and it's easy for our mouths to take over and say
Yes.
things
Hmm.
that are not necessarily, you're saying them out of frustration. It's not really how you feel. Sometimes it is how you
Hmm.
feel, but it's not helpful to say that. And so
Hmm.
to make sure you are guarding your tongue and always speaking life into the situation,
Yes.
always speaking positive, always reminding people that they're valued, that they're loved, what's important, what the goal is. And even if your family is totally chaos now, it's nothing wrong with speaking over that and say we're going to be a close knit tight family. Like, speak life into the situation,
Hmm.
because your words, especially as a parent in the situation, they have a lot of influence. And so if
Hmm.
you keep speaking positive and you keep speaking life and you keep telling the family where we're gonna be, this is happening right now, but we're gonna be fine. We're gonna have that. People will start gravitating to align themselves with what you're declaring over the family. That's how powerful
Hmm.
your words are. So always make sure you speak life, even if you're having problems in your marriage, because of course these things do cause marriage problems. Speak life over your spouse. Don't just start blaming them and saying it's your fault and this and that. Speak life over them. Speak like, hey, we're in it this far. I know we love each other. Let's do this.
Okay.
Just speak life into the situation. So I think that's another very, very key point.
Right. Hmm. So I think we've covered most of it,
Mm-hmm.
most of the tips on what you need to do beforehand, what you need to do during difficult situations, and also trying to foster peace
Yeah.
and respect in the household.
Mm.
What kind of mindsets do you feel are important to either have before going into the relationship, the combined relationship, or even during? Because we know that we're going to go through challenges. There's going to be ups and downs. But is there anything that we should make sure that we're doing as adults and as parents to, constantly prep ourselves for the challenge?
Yeah, so I mean, the main thing that comes to my mind, and I always like to speak to like kind of the root of the issue, and so, and I kind of speak more to like I guess you can say spiritual things because those are what affects what's
Mm-hmm.
on the outside, and so to me, you have to be flexible with your expectations because a lot of the time the disagreements, the problems, the heartache, the disappointments, it comes from the expectations that we had in the beginning. And
Mm-hmm.
even when people get married, they say, "Oh, I never expected my husband was going to do this," or even your kid, when they get to teenagers and start cutting up, you're like, "Oh, I never expected that my kids would do that." So you have to be flexible in your expectations and understanding that because if you hold fast to these expectations that you had, especially depending on where those expectations came from, because a lot of times they do come from hurt and disappointments
Yeah.
and traumas that you previously had. So again, you got to sort through those stuff so that you're not holding people accountable for things that they don't have anything to do with. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to be flexible in your expectations. It may not, your kid may not be the way you thought they were going to be, but they're still your
Mm-hmm.
kid, and be flexible in the expectation. You may not expect your husband to respond this way to your child, or for you to have to deal with this from your
Mm-hmm.
partner's child, but be flexible in your expectations
Right.
and give people grace to understand that nobody's perfect, and as long as God is in the situation, He can work it out for good. And so yeah,
Mm-hmm.
just to be flexible in your expectations. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I love that. And that's it. That's very
Yeah,
key. Be
yeah,
open-minded, be flexible, have a spirit of love, and want to cultivate peace and respect in the household.
yeah,
I love
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to make sacrifices to do that. So
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah, you
even with our own
do.
expectations of ourselves and what we want, sometimes we got to kind of put that stuff on the back burner for a little
Mm-hmm.
bit and things like that to get the kind of
Right.
results that we want. So yeah, definitely
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna have to make some sacrifices, and it's important to know that in advance because when people start having to give up stuff that yeah, so yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. I'm sure we could talk even more about this topic.
exactly.
But it's just been, I feel like I've gained a lot of knowledge about it, and I'm hoping that others will gain some good information about it as well. I put across the screen your Instagram and your Facebook. Your tag so people would know where to find you.
Hmm.
What about your website? Do you have a website where people can go to find you?
Yeah, so my website is www.unveilingthespirit.com. On that website, you can find out about anything that I'm doing. Sometimes I do webinars. I have my podcast there. I have a vlog post that I do there. I try to do them bi-weekly. I have my
Hmm.
coaching services there. I have my books there. I have my other social media handles. So you can find everything there on www.unveilingthespirit.com.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you very much. I will also put your website in the comment section so that people can tune in there and find it there in case they have any questions. You all are welcome to reach out to me as well. I'm at www.confidentlily.com, and Lily is spelled like the flower, Lily. But again, thank you so much, Miss Stephanie, for just dropping all the gems and sharing your knowledge with us today. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. So until next time, I hope that if you do have a blended family, that you will live in bliss. And I'm praying that everything will be peaceful. So
Yeah,
have a
yeah,
great night, everybody.
yeah. Thank you again. Bye.
Mhm.